Hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, Low Nose Boxing. And once again, I want to give a big thank you to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. If it wasn't for him, none of this would be possible. In the sport of boxing, right, everybody makes a big deal about a fighter being undefeated. Quote unquote, a fighter having an O under his record. There's fighters out there that are very apprehensive in fighting top level competition because they're afraid that if they lose their O, their buzz is gonna go down the toilet. That's not entirely true. Many great fighters in the past have losses under their belt. From Sugar Ray Leonard, Muhammad Ali, Sugar Ray Robinson, Roberto Duran. I mean, I can keep going on and on. And a lot of fans are very fickle. A lot of fans are quick to throw fighters in the garbage over a loss, over a blemish on their record. But yet in UFC, you have fighters with multiple losses, but yet they still have their fan base. However, a loss can affect the fighter mentally, depending on how that fighter's mental strength is. So what we're gonna talk about right now, we're gonna talk about fighters that were able to bounce back from losses and accomplish more greatness. And when I mean come back from a loss, I'm not talking about returning and getting a victory over a fighter that he was supposed to beat. I'm talking about coming back from a loss and becoming a world champion, coming back from a loss and accomplishing more accolades, more greatness. And we're also going to talk about fighters that were not the same after suffering defeat. So we're going to make this list short because there's so many fighters that were able to bounce back from losses. So we're going to do a 5. For me, the 5 most noteworthy fighters that were able to bounce back from losses. But before we do that, I have to give an honorable mention to fighters such as Marco Antonio Barrera, Lennox Lewis, Sugar Shane Mosley, Vasyl Lomachenko, Larry Holmes. I mean, I could go on and on listing fighters that were able to bounce back from losses. So with the 5 fighters that I'm gonna talk about tonight with y'all that were able to bounce back from losses and accomplish more greatness. Fighter number 1, and not in no specific order, Manny Pacquiao. Manny Pacquiao suffered devastating losses early in his career. Manny Pacquiao was knocked out early in his career when he was coming up the ranks as an unknown. And he went on to accomplish more greatness. He went on to defeat guys like Marco Antonio Barrera. And then he went on to lose to Erik Morales. He bounced back from the Erik Morales loss to beat Morales twice in the trilogy. Manny Pacquiao was on an incredible run. Manny Pacquiao eventually got knocked out by Juan Manuel Marquez. Many people felt that the highly anticipated fight between Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather was done. Finito, never gonna happen. However, Manny Pacquiao bounced back from that loss to rebuild himself back to the point where the Floyd Mayweather fight was still relevant. No, the fight was not, the fight did not have the same luster that it did before that loss to Marquez. But yet and still, Manny Pacquiao was able to bounce back to get the Floyd Mayweather fight. He lost the Floyd Mayweather fight, came back, and then eventually lost to Jeff Horn. Everyone at that time said Manny Pacquiao is done. He doesn't have it anymore. Losing to Floyd Mayweather, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing to be ashamed of. But he took a loss to Jeff Horn. And then he turned around and beat Keith one-time Thurman in a fight where Manny Pacquiao was an underdog. That fight right there goes down as one of Manny Pacquiao's best wins ever. Perfect example of a fighter that was able to bounce back from a loss. Another fighter on the list, Evander Holyfield. When Evander Holyfield lost to Riddick Bowe in that 1990 Fight of the Year, he took so much punishment in that fight. Many people felt that Evander Holyfield should retire, right? But what did Evander Holyfield do? He worked himself back into a rematch with Riddick Bowe. He beat Riddick Bowe in the rematch. And then Evander Holyfield lost to Michael Moore in a fight where I believe he had heart problems in the middle of the fight. And he momentarily retired, if I'm not correct. And then he bounced back after visiting a faith healer, which confirmed that his heart was healed. Praise be the Lord for that, you know. But Evander Holyfield bounced back from the Michael Moore loss. He had some decent wins under his belt. One of them was a fight against Ray Mercer, if I'm not correct. And then he fought Riddick Bowe. He fought Riddick Bowe for the third time and got knocked out brutally. He got knocked out in brutal fashion. Evander Holyfield looked like he was finished, right? But what did Evander Holyfield do? He got right back up from that loss and worked his way into a mega fight with Iron Mike Tyson, a fight where many people felt was dangerous, a fight where many people felt like his life was at risk, and Evander Holyfield scored the upset. Went on to eventually beat Michael Moore and get his get back. Another example of a fighter that was able to bounce back from defeat. Another example I'm about to give you right now. Miguel Cotto. Miguel Cotto took a loss to Antonio Margarito. A very controversial loss because many people feel that Margarito was wearing plaster. Nevertheless, Miguel Cotto not only took a loss in that fight, he took a terrible beatdown in that fight. He took the type of beatdown where fighters don't even recover from that. Not just mentally, but physically as well, right? 3 fights later, he takes another hellacious beating by the hands of Manny Pacquiao. Cotto looked like he was done, right? What did Miguel Cotto do? He jumped up to 154. He hired Emanuel Steward as his trainer. He got 3 fights in a row, became a world champion along the way at 154, and avenged his loss to Antonio Margarito, which eventually led to Miguel Cotto landing a big fight with Floyd Mayweather. He gave Floyd Mayweather arguably the toughest fight of his career, right? He took that loss and then lost again, back to back. He lost to Floyd Mayweather and then lost to Austin Trout. The average fighter will be demoralized mentally after that. What did Miguel Cotto do? He hired Freddie Roach and he moved to 160 pounds. Became the middleweight champion of the world when he defeated Sergio Martinez. Miguel Cotto had a nice little run at 160 until he fought and lost to Canelo Alvarez. Miguel Cotto, once again, another fighter who was able to bounce back from defeat to accomplish more greatness, right? Another example, Roberto Duran. Roberto Duran been proven for years that he can bounce back from a loss. Roberto Duran, before he was popular to the casual fans, was dominating the lightweight division for years. He became undisputed at 135. And during his run at 135, Roberto Duran took a loss to an unknown fighter by the name of Esteban de Jesus, who turned out to be an incredible fighter and become a world champion in his own right. Duran turned around, fought him 2 more times, knocked him out 2 more times. Then Roberto Duran moves up to 147 pounds and beats Sugar Ray Leonard, right? Eventually, immediately, he has a rematch with Sugar Ray Leonard. The infamous No Mas loss. I mean, if a loss in boxing could be demoralizing, that hands down might be the most demoralizing loss that a fighter could have. He literally gave up in that fight. It looked like it was the end of the road for Roberto Duran. Just a few fights later, he takes another loss to Wilfredo Benitez, right? By this time, it looks like Duran is done. Finito. It's a wrap. But no, Roberto Duran eventually scores some nice impressive victories under his belt and lands a title fight against undefeated young Davey Moore in Madison Square Garden. Davey Moore was the favorite, and Roberto Duran turned in one of his most finest performances ever at knocking out Davey Moore. Roberto Duran bounced back. You follow what I'm saying? He bounced back. And he did it multiple times. He eventually fought Marvelous Marvin Hagler, lost a 15-round decision, and then fights Thomas Hitman Hearns and gets knocked out brutally in 2 rounds. Roberto Duran comes back, 37 years old, at 160 pounds, and beats Iran Barkley. Iran Barkley, prior to fighting Roberto Duran, had defeated Tommy Hearns twice. Tommy Hearns is the guy that knocked out Roberto Duran. So you could imagine what the critics were saying going into that fight. Roberto Duran is stepping into a ring with the guy that beat the guy that knocked him flat. And Roberto Duran scores the upset. Once again, another example of a fighter who was able to bounce back from defeat to accomplish more greatness. So we got Manny Pacquiao, we got Miguel Cotto, we got Evander Holyfield, we got Roberto Duran. And now, modern days, we got Saul Canelo Alvarez. Saul Canelo Alvarez took on Floyd Mayweather Jr. and took a one-sided beating. He did not get beat up physically to the point where he was damaged or knocked out, but the way he was outclassed in that fight, that type of loss could demoralize a fighter mentally and get a fighter to question themselves. What did Saul Canelo Alvarez did? He bounced back and scored win after win after win. He went on to beat Erislandy Lara. He went on to beat Miguel Cotto. He went on to beat Triple G twice. He went on to beat Danny Jacobs. He went to 168 and became the undisputed super middleweight champion of the world. He bounced back from defeat. He was not demoralized. Recently, Canelo Alvarez 2 fights ago lost a one-sided decision to Dimitri Bivol. And people right now are already saying that Canelo might be done. But Canelo already proved in the past that he can bounce back from defeat. So I'm not backing that narrative up that Canelo is done. I'm not doing that. There's a term that says, if someone shows you who they are, believe him. Canelo already showed the boxing world who he is. He's shown his resilience, his ability to bounce back from defeat, right? Now, briefly, I'm gonna touch on this momentarily. We're gonna talk about fighters that were great, that were not able to reclaim greatness after suffering defeat. Roy Jones Jr., for instance. Roy Jones Jr., one of the greatest fighters of all time. Roy Jones in his prime, in any fantasy matchup with any fighter within his weight classes, to me, personally, I think Roy Jones beats all of them. But when Roy Jones lost to Antonio Tarver, when he suffered that brutal knockout, he was never the same fighter after that. He did score victories. Yes, he did get some wins after that, but he was never able to accomplish further greatness. The biggest win he was able to achieve after losing to Antonio Tarver was to Felix Trinidad. That's a great win. However, Felix Trinidad just came out of a 3-year retirement, a fighter who was moving up from 147 pounds. Now, if Roy Jones Jr. would have been victorious over Joe Calzaghe, then you can place him among the list of fighters that were able to bounce back from defeat, but he didn't. Another name I'm going to mention is Meldrick Taylor. Meldrick Taylor was a phenom. Meldrick Taylor was an Olympic gold medalist, one of the most talented fighters in boxing, period. One of the fastest hands ever in the sport of boxing. After his loss to Julio Cesar Chavez, Meldrick Taylor was not the same fighter. He wasn't the same fighter. He did win some fights. He did become a world champion again, but he never reached the level of greatness that he had prior to fighting Julio Cesar Chavez. Another fighter, my personal favorite fighter of all time, Felix Tito Trinidad. After he lost to Bernard Hopkins, he was never the same fighter. He did get some wins. He did beat Ricardo Mayorga, but he beat guys he was supposed to beat. When he fought Winky Wright, he lost. When he came back and fought Roy Jones, he lost. Felix Trinidad was never the same fighter. Another example, Fernando Vargas. Fernando Vargas was a fighter who was fast-tracked. Like today, we got fighters that were fast-tracked, like Teofimo Lopez becoming a champion in 16, 15 fights. Lomachenko becoming a champion in 2 or 3 fights. Shakur Stevenson becoming a champion in less than 20 fights. Dimitri Bivol becoming a world champion in less than 20 fights. Fernando Vargas been done that. He was an incredible fighter, and he was proven. Fernando Vargas had victories over Winky Wright. He had victories over Ike Corte and Yuri Boy Campos and Raul Marquez. But when he fought Felix Trinidad, that fight ruined him. Fernando Vargas took an incredible amount of punishment in that fight. He was knocked down 5 times. Even though it was definitely a fight of the year, he was never the same fighter after that. He wasn't able to bounce back. And I'm not making this video to put down these fighters in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't take away from their greatness, because I judge a fighter based on what they did in their prime. At the end of the day, these are fighters that are Hall of Famers. Some of them are going into the Hall of Fame. Roy Jones is a legend. In no way, shape, or form am I putting Roy Jones down or Felix Trinidad. I'm just speaking facts. These guys were not able to bounce back to accomplish the same greatness that they had prior to losing. There's fighters that bounce back from losses, and there's fighters that haven't bounced back from losses. With that being said, I appreciate the time and the opportunity to share some boxing knowledge and history with y'all. With that being said, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and I'm out.